Hey everybody, didn't mean to startle you. I know you're not used to seeing me in these videos, but for talking about your box template, I thought it was important that I show you how to go about starting this. So what you need to do, and I'm using the Wheaties box here as a demo for this project. You, of course, can choose whatever product you want. It just needs to be a six-sided box. So when I say six-sided, you've got the front, you've got the sides, the back, but don't forget you also have the top and the bottom on here. So what you need to do first of all, very carefully peel this open. All right, you don't want to tear any of these too badly. And I, of course, just did a little bit here. So I've got the top open here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to actually remove the contents. So we're not dealing with that. So I have an empty box. So I've got the top. Didn't do the greatest job peeling it apart. But I didn't destroy it so much that I won't be able to. All right. Get my measurements off this. So you'll realize too on here, you've got flaps with different shapes. We're going to talk about how to go about doing that in Illustrator. And then the final thing, there's going to be a side glued panel here. And the key here is to actually get this apart so that it is completely flat. You need to be able to do that so that we can get out a ruler and measure all these little flaps in here. Now, it's not going to be as daunting as perhaps it looks right now, but just notice here on some of these flaps I've got some notches here and I've got a notch here, and so what we're going to do is recreate this as close as possible. What you may want to notice too, let me see if I can find it. There was one of the lectures, and I think I kind of tore it here, but what you'll notice when you pull this apart, somewhere on one of these flaps that is usually hidden by glue, you'll see the printer marks here showing all the colors that were used with the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black commercial printing or four-color printing process. You'll also see here if they used any Pantone colors, if they have any specialty colors or what we call spot colors, usually Pantone colors. And my guess is on here, I think I kind of botched it, but I think the orange for the Wheaties box, they actually called out a Pantone orange on it. So now that we have this, what we can do is then jump onto Illustrator and start building this. Now to do this, you're going to need a ruler to be able to measure all these different sides. So let's go ahead and jump onto Illustrator and start building this. So now that we are in Illustrator, we need to create an artboard that's going to be big enough for you to work on here. I'm just kind of eyeballing my flattened box here. And it's going to be larger than most of the formats we've worked on here. So I'm going to do Create New. And I'm kind of eyeballing this right now. I may need to make this a little larger, but this will give us a start. So I'm doing 20 inches by 16. That's a good kind of starting point on here. I'm going to go ahead and build this horizontal or in the landscape orientation. You're only going to need one artboard for this, so go ahead and hit Create. And so here is my big artboard. I can tell already I'm probably going to need to go a little larger, which is fine. You can just grab the artboard tool and pull this out, and we can always adjust this. Let me clear this off a little bit here. All right, so now let's start building this. So you should have your flattened box, and let's start with the front panel, the main display panel on here. And I've already measured this, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle here. That's not the right size, actually. But I'm going to come up here in the dialog box once I select my rectangle, and what I've done is I've measured this, and this box is 7 inches and 3/4, which is 7.75 by 12 inches. Oh. So there you go. That's my front panel. All right. Now, once you start building these, you're going to realize if this is the size of the front panel, and I'm looking at how this is laid out, The back panel is going to be exactly the same size. So I'm just going to hold the Option key down and pull this out over here. All right. Now I need to do some of the side panels here. And so I'm measuring my side panel, and my side panel is 2.5 inches thick. So here's the deal. I'm just going to draw another rectangle here. We already know the height on this is 12 because obviously if that's what the front and the back covers are, this is going to be 12 as well. And as I mentioned, the width on this side is going to be 2.5. All right, if I have one side here, that means this side is going to be identical as well. And let's make these all uniform size or line weight here. So already I've got the front, the back, the two sides. And then what we need to do is let's go across horizontally. I have a interior flap that's about 5/8 of an inch that's over here. So again, I can just draw a rectangle here. And again, I know this is 12 inches wide. And I just measured this, and it is 5/8 of an inch, which is 0.625. And I'm going to go over here. If you're wondering why my lines keep getting whacked out here, let's go ahead and make these all uniform. Make them all 2-point just so you guys can see them. Then we have to talk about the flaps on the top and the bottom. So I'm measuring my flaps right now at the bottom, and they are they're going to be height-wise. Again, I broke out my ruler. It's 1.75. And I know from measuring my front panel, it's got to be the same width. So that's going to be So as you can see, you can quickly build some of these. My bottom flap is going to be the same. So I'm just holding the Option key down and copying that. And it's going to be the same over here. Now there's some notches and things. We'll put those together in a minute here. I'm just going to copy these. So already you can see my artboard is still a little bit too small. I'm going to grab that artboard tool and make it a little larger up here. So I'm looking, and it looks like I still need these interior flaps here. And let me measure those. I should have measured all this before I got on the computer here. These are 1.25. So I know from doing the side flap it's 2.5. So if I do a rectangle here, it needs to be 2.5 wide because that's how wide this is. And then I just forgot what I told you this was. It is 1.25. So I'm going to do 1.25. And this is the same down here, so I'm just going to copy this here. And let's kind of center all this on the page that I created. Now, how to do some of these specialty notches and things? Well, you can just use shapes to do that. So I don't have my camera on anymore, but there's two little triangular shapes that are taken out of this. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use my polygon tool. And if you click and drag, in Illustrator, it's always the default is going to be this hexagon. What I'm going to do is use the arrows on the keyboard, and I'm going down. And what I want to do is get a little triangle to get those notches. And I'll zoom in on this a little bit. So I've got one little triangle here. It's still too big. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. This is going to be to build my notches out of this. So, and I've got two notches. Now, here's the deal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Pathfinder tool to take these notches out. And I want to do both triangles at the same time. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to select these two triangles. Now this won't work if you group it. What you need to do is come up here under Object, and instead of grouping it, make it a compound path. Now what I'm going to do is select my grouping of triangles or my compound path of triangles, and that. Let's go ahead and open this Pathfinder tool. And now I'm going to use minus front. The triangle should be sitting on top there. And when I do that, now I've gotten my notches. Before I do that, let's make sure these are centered, first of all. Oh, I was a little bit off. Let's go ahead and do this now. So there I've got the notches. Now, there's a couple other notches here I have. One of them, and again, I don't have my camera on, but I can't show you. It's got a little rectangular notch, but it's actually more of a kind of trapezoid. So I'm going to start with a rectangle here. And I'm using the white arrow. I'm going to grab one point, and I'm just using the arrows on the keyboard. So I'm just eyeballing this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Now I'm going to grab this one, and again using the keyboard arrows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And I'm going to use this shape to create a notch out of this shape. And what I'm going to do is select both of these. Let's make sure it's perfectly centered. It was a little bit off. And now I'm going to move this down. And now I can use my Pathfinder tool using that minus front to take the notch out. And then the last notch I have is actually out of this panel, and it's different too. It's actually got rounded edges on it. So for this, I'm going to use the rounded rectangle. And again, I'm just eyeballing this right now for time's sake. I can use the keyboard arrows, either the up or down arrows, to make either more round corners or less round corners. And once I get this the way I need it, I'm going to go ahead, make sure you've centered these, and I'm going to do that. And now I'm going to use the minus front and take that out to get these notches. Now, how do we go about putting this all together? I'm going to show you. This is a really going to save you a lot of time. Obviously, for your design, you're not going to want all these panels kind of floating here and not lining up with each other. And I'll show you the way we do this. I'm going to select everything right now. I just want to make sure we have the same line weight on everything. So I gave everything a 2-point rule on this. Let's talk about these center panels here. I'm just going to select all of these. And I'm going to use the alignment tools up here at the top and center everything exactly. Now what we need to do is have everything start lining up exactly. And you know what? I'll probably do this way too. Let's make sure these all line up. Actually, it's not going to matter. And I'll show you why. This is the front of the box, and if you remember how when I unpeeled it, so this is the front, this is the back. I know it seems like it's in reverse order, but it's not. We're going to use the front panel as our key, and I'll show you how this works. And to do this, you need to actually open this align panel. I have this floating down here. And the align panel, when you open it up, it's going to look like this. Let me hide this. All right. And it looks like it has all the same alignment tools that you see up at the top in your control panel. And it does, but go ahead and show options on here. And to find this, it's up here in the window drop-down menu to align. And I'll show you how this works. We're going to use my front panel here as our alignment guide. And I'll show you how you can get everything to line up perfectly. Let's talk about the panels going across this way. So I want this flap to butt up exactly on this one. Just double check these are all perfectly aligned, centered. Here's what you do. Select these two, and whatever panel you're using as your master, in this case it's the front panel here, you want to, once you've selected both, double tap this center one, and you'll notice it gets a little bit heavier blue line around it. Then what you want to do is come down here where it says distribute spacing. You want to make sure this is set at 0. And then when you click this, it will completely butt up against each other. So I can do the same thing here with these two. Remember, we're using the front as our master, so I'm going to double tap that one and do 0. Now I want the back panel to line up with this one, so I'm going to select these two. Now I don't want this side panel to move, so I'm going to double tap that. And you can see slowly we're getting all of these panels. So now I'm going to line this flap up here. So now I've got these center ones all done. Let's talk about the other flaps up here. I'm going to select these two. Now I've got these all lined up. I don't want to move them at all. So the first thing I need to do is get this panel to be perfectly centered on this one. So again, this is our master. Double click that. Let's first make sure that's lined up and centered, so it looks like it is. Now, instead of using this distribute spacing, we're going to use this one, and we're going to do it, make sure this is set at 0, and then go ahead and do that, and it will perfectly butt up. Let's do the center one. You need to select these two. I don't want this to move because I've already lined it up, so double click that. That's going to be our master, and we're going to first center it, and then we're going to come down here and close the spacing up. Same thing on this one as well. Select both of them. You don't want this back panel to move. We went to all the trouble to line everything up. So lock that in place, center this, and then close the gap. And then we're going to do the last 3 panels down here. Again, we don't want this to move, so lock it by double clicking it. Make sure this is centered. Select these two. We don't want this to move because you already lined that up, so lock it and double click it. Center this up. And then finally we'll do these last two. Again, we don't want that to move, so lock it by double clicking it. Center this and then close the gap out. So that's how you can very quickly build up your template on here. Now I want you to do one other thing. And you should place this on the board however large your board has gotten at this point. What we're going to do is you want to make sure that on your template that you lock this down. And as you start designing, you can design on other layers, but you can lock this so that nothing moves on it. But before you do that, I want to talk about putting in bleed lines here. And this is the important thing. In commercial printing, if you just design your color and your graphics to go to the edge of your template, what we always ask that you to do in almost any printed application is that you build in bleed. And what bleed is a little extra space outside your template so that when this goes through the printing process and it gets trimmed out and gets cut out, it's never absolutely perfectly aligned. It's always going to be just slightly off. So if you have color or graphics that you want to touch the edges here, you need to make sure that you extend them a little bit outside the boundary here. And I'll show you how you create your bleed lines on here. I'm going to go and select everything now, all the flaps that I've created. And similar to what I did earlier here, we're going to make this a compound path. And the reason we're doing that, I still want all these panels to be separate when I start designing this. But for this one function, I want all these shapes to function as one shape. And so what I'm going to do is now I've made a compound path of all these. What you want to do is come up here under the object drop-down menu, come down here to path. And what we're going to do is do an offset path to create your bleed line on here. Now, standard bleed in most printing is 1/8 of an inch, so let's go ahead and use that. That digitally is 0.125. Go ahead and hit OK. And we want this to only be and you'll see this is just one whole shape here. But you actually don't want this to be a shape. What you want this to be is a guideline. So come up here under View, and come down here to Guides and do Make Guides. And what that has done now, it has given you a little blue guideline to show you if you have any color or any graphics, anything that you want to print off the edge, you need to make sure it's that any color or graphics extends beyond your panels onto that bleed line. And then now that we've done that, we can go ahead and release it from the compound path. That way, as you're designing, you can still work with individual panels on here. So once you get this set up, this is going to be the template you use for moving forward with your design once you've submitted thumbnails.